Let's get right into it. Number 10. Your brain is a completionist who never asked for the job. Picture this. You're making your morning coffee, bleary-eyed, completely unprepared for any kind of philosophical crisis, and then the foam on top of your latte looks exactly like a disappointed grandfather. You didn't ask for that. You weren't thinking about your grandfather, and yet there he is, judging your life choices from inside a ceramic mug. This isn't a glitch. It's not sleep deprivation playing tricks. What's actually happening is that your brain is doing something it was literally built to do, and it's doing it so automatically, so aggressively, that you have zero say in the matter. Here's the deal. Your brain doesn't experience the world passively. It doesn't sit back and wait for information to come in before forming an opinion. Instead, it's constantly generating predictions. Before your eyes even finish processing a visual scene, your brain has already drafted 3 theories about what it's looking at. It's like that coworker who answers your question before you finish asking it. Except the coworker is your entire nervous system, and it's been doing this since the moment you were born. This system is called predictive processing, and neuroscientists have spent decades trying to fully map it out because it basically explains everything weird about human perception. Your brain takes whatever fuzzy, ambiguous, low-resolution information your eyes hand it, and runs it through an absolutely enormous mental library of things I've seen before. And because faces are the most important visual category in that library, the thing your brain has been pattern matching since infancy, faces win the pattern contest almost every single time. 2 circles and a curve? Face. 3 blobs in the right arrangement? Face. A power outlet? Absolutely a face, and frankly kind of a startled one. You're not hallucinating. You're just running a very eager face detection algorithm that was never given an off switch. Number 9. The ancient survival circuit that is way too enthusiastic. Here's a fun thought experiment. Imagine you're a human ancestor, several 100,000 years ago, standing in tall grass. You see something that might be a face in the shadows. Could be a predator. Could be a weird-shaped rock. You have approximately 1 second to decide. Option A. You assume it's nothing, ignore it, and continue existing. Option B. You assume it's something, flinch back, maybe run. If you pick option A and you're wrong, you get eaten. Game over. No descendants. Your genes vanish from the planet. If you pick option B and you're wrong, you look a little silly and your friends make fun of you for 3 days. This is what evolutionary biologists call an asymmetric cost structure, and it's the reason your brain evolved to be almost embarrassingly overcautious about faces. Natural selection didn't reward accuracy. It rewarded survival. And the survival math was very clear. False positives are annoying, but false negatives are fatal. So what you got, what we all got, is a face detection system that is tuned to fire at the slightest provocation. A system that would rather see 1,000 fake faces in the wallpaper than miss one real one hiding in the bushes. The technical name for this cognitive habit is hyperactive agent detection, and it's the same mechanism that makes you instinctively feel like the shadowy corner of your bedroom at 2 a.m. is watching you. Your brain treats ambiguity like a threat, and the fastest way to resolve ambiguity is to assume something is alive, intentional, and looking directly at you, which explains the power outlets, and the front grille of your car, and literally every piece of toast you've ever eaten. Basically, your ancestors were so paranoid that they made it your permanent default setting. You're welcome. Number 8. The Fusiform face area. Your brain's face-obsessed VIP lounge. There is a specific region in your brain that exists almost entirely to recognize faces. Not objects. Not words. Not the faces of dogs or horses or literally anything else in the animal kingdom. Human faces. It's called the Fusiform face area, or FFA, and it is embarrassingly dedicated to its one job. Neuroscientists discovered it in the 1990s when they started running fMRI experiments and noticed that a specific chunk of the temporal lobe would light up like a Christmas tree every time subjects looked at a human face. Didn't matter if the face was happy, sad, upside down, famous, or completely made up. Show the FFA a face, it activates. It's like a very enthusiastic intern who loses their mind every time a senior employee walks in the room. But here's where it gets interesting. Researchers started showing people faces that weren't really faces, images with just vaguely face-like arrangements, and the FFA still fired. Then they showed people objects that looked kind of face-like, and it still fired. At this point, scientists began to suspect that the FFA is not asking a lot of hard questions before it gets excited. What this means practically is that when you see a face in a cloud, or in a knotted piece of wood, or in the moon's craters, your FFA is activating in basically the same way it would for an actual human face. Your brain is not filing these events under weird visual glitch. It is registering them as face encounters. Full face detection protocol initiated. Some researchers have even suggested that the FFA might be the neurological origin point for why seeing faces feels slightly social, like the grumpy car headlights from the street somehow have a mood. Because your brain isn't just detecting a face shape. It's beginning the same processing chain it uses for real people. Threat or friend. Familiar or stranger. Happy or about to ruin your day. The wood knot at the base of your stairs has been assessed as vaguely suspicious by your brain. And it's going to keep getting assessed that way every single morning, for as long as you live there. Number 7. Pareidolia. The official name for your brain's most unhinged hobby. At some point, a scientist looked at the phenomenon of humans seeing faces in clouds, trees, and burnt toast, and decided it needed a clinical name. That name is pareidolia, pronounced pareidolia, and it is officially defined as the tendency to perceive a specific, meaningful image in a random or ambiguous visual pattern, which is a very dignified way of saying your brain makes stuff up and then completely commits to it. Pareidolia isn't limited to faces, technically. It also covers hearing words in white noise, seeing animals in clouds, and finding shapes in ink blots. But faces are by far its most common and most enthusiastic output, because, as you now know, your brain has an entire specialized region on standby for exactly that purpose. It's like having a smoke detector that also goes off when someone makes toast. Technically doing its job. Also kind of ruining breakfast. What makes pareidolia genuinely fascinating and slightly unsettling is that it's not a conscious choice. You don't decide to see a face in the bathroom tiles. You just do. And once you've seen it, you can't unsee it. That smug little tile face is permanent now. It lives in your bathroom. It will outlast your lease. Studies have shown that pareidolia varies in intensity from person to person. Some people see faces in literally everything, the shadows on walls, the patterns in carpet, the way a jacket hangs on a chair. Others have a more modest version of the experience. But nobody is immune. Completely face-blind pareidolia doesn't exist in neurologically typical brains. If you have normal visual processing and enough ambiguous stimuli, the faces will come. There's also something deeply strange about the emotional response pareidolia triggers. People don't just see these faces, they react to them. A frowning cloud feels gloomy. A laughing pepper feels cheerful. A car with headlights set too close together feels anxious, and you weirdly feel a little sorry for it. Your brain isn't just pattern-matching shapes. It's running a full social-emotional read on a vegetable. You are out here developing feelings about a bell pepper, and your brain sees absolutely nothing wrong with that. Number 6. Babies broke your brain before you could even walk. Here's a fact that will reframe your entire relationship with your own perception. The reason you see faces everywhere isn't just evolutionary pressure from ancient predators. Part of it is developmental, meaning your brain was specifically trained to be obsessed with faces during the first few months of your life, before you had any say in the matter. Newborn humans are born with remarkably poor vision. Everything is blurry, low contrast, and largely incomprehensible. And yet, and this is the part that researchers found genuinely wild, newborns as young as 9 minutes old show a measurable preference for face-like patterns over any other visual stimulus. 9 minutes. You had been alive for less time than it takes to make a mediocre pasta and you were already a face-seeking machine. This preference gets reinforced rapidly and relentlessly. For the first year of your life, the most important things in your world were faces. Faces meant food. Faces meant safety. Faces meant someone was going to pick you up and stop whatever terrible thing was happening. Your entire survival depended on being exquisitely sensitive to face-shaped information. And so your brain dedicated enormous resources to that task, built specialized neural architecture around it, and practiced constantly. By the time you were old enough to remember anything, you had already spent thousands of hours drilling face recognition to the point of obsession. The fusiform face area wasn't just active, it was optimized. And optimization at that scale doesn't just help you recognize actual faces. It makes you so good at detecting face patterns that you start firing on things that merely resemble faces, at decreasing levels of resemblance, with decreasing amounts of evidence required. Your childhood trained you to be a face-finding expert. And like any expert who gets too good at their specialty, you now can't turn it off. The electrical outlet on your wall didn't do anything wrong. You just can't look at two circles and a rectangle without your brain auto-completing the sentence. You were, quite literally, conditioned into this from birth. The faces in the wallpaper are basically your oldest habit. Number 5, your brain thinks inanimate objects have feelings, and it doesn't even feel bad about it. Seeing a face in something is one thing, but have you noticed what happens after you see the face? You start attributing a personality to it. The water stain on the ceiling isn't just a vague oval. It's tired. Somehow. The crumpled tissue on the desk looks worried. The building across the street with the arched windows looks smug, and you've been mildly irritated at it for 2 years. This is where Pareidolia makes a hard left turn into even stranger psychological territory, because face detection doesn't happen in isolation. It's bundled together with a whole package of social cognition, all the mental tools your brain uses to interpret other people. Tools like theory of mind, which is your ability to model the internal mental states of other beings, and emotional attribution, which is your tendency to assume that things with faces have feelings. When your FFA fires and says, "Face detected," it's not sending a memo only to the visual perception department. It's sending it to the whole building. And the social reasoning department, the emotional empathy department, and the "is this thing a threat or a friend" department all receive the same alert simultaneously. This is why people apologize to furniture they've bumped into. It's why you feel a flicker of guilt throwing away a jar that has a particularly sad-looking dent. It's why Pixar has built an entire cinematic empire on the principle that if you give an object eyes, humans will immediately and completely invest in its emotional well-being. The lamp in the opening of a Pixar movie gets a look of distress and millions of adults feel genuine concern. That's not sentimentality. That's your social cognition system running on hardware that was never told to only apply to biological entities. And the deeply funny part is that your brain knows the jar doesn't have feelings. The rational part understands this is a jar. But the emotional social response fires anyway, because that system operates faster than conscious reasoning. By the time your prefrontal cortex has finished a thought, your limbic system has already decided the jar looks sad and you should maybe be nicer to it. Your brain is both smart enough to understand object permanence and emotionally generous enough to feel sympathy for a tissue box. These two things are happening simultaneously, every day, in the same skull. Number 4. The upside-down face trick that broke psychology's brain. In 1980, a psychologist named Peter Thompson did something simple and absolutely devastating to our understanding of face perception. He took a photograph of Margaret Thatcher, flipped it upside down, and then, while it was still inverted, rotated the eyes and mouth right side up. The result looked vaguely strange but basically fine when viewed upside down. Then he flipped the whole thing back over. What people saw when it was right side up was so disturbing that participants in the study had genuine visceral reactions. The face looked monstrous, deeply, wrongly off in a way that was hard to even describe. And this effect, now called the Thatcher Effect, revealed something important and slightly horrifying about how face detection actually works. Your brain doesn't process faces the way it processes other objects. With a chair, a shoe, or a lamp, your brain reads individual features and assembles them into a whole. It doesn't particularly care about the orientation. A chair upside down is still obviously a chair. But with faces, your brain uses a completely different strategy called holistic processing. It reads the entire face as a single unified pattern, with all the features in their correct spatial relationships to each other. It doesn't just see eyes and a mouth. It sees the configuration of eyes and a mouth. And this configurational reading only works properly in one orientation, right side up, because your brain has been calibrated since infancy to read faces that are vertically aligned the way human faces actually appear in the world. Flip a face upside down and your holistic processing collapses entirely. The system doesn't know how to run. It falls back to reading individual features, which is why the scrambled Thatcher face looked tolerable inverted but horrifying upright. What this tells us about pareidolia is that your face detection system isn't just looking for eyes and a mouth arranged anywhere, in any configuration. It's looking for a very specific spatial grammar, the right proportional relationships, the right vertical hierarchy, the right implied structure. And that grammar is so deeply wired into your perception that violating it doesn't just look wrong. It looks like something from a nightmare. You have a face rulebook in your head that you never wrote, never agreed to, and cannot override. And anything that plays by those rules, even remotely, even accidentally, gets flagged as a face. The power outlet passes the test. The scrambled, upside-down political photograph does not. Your brain has standards. They're just extremely weird ones. Number 3. Why some people see way more faces than others. If you've ever pointed out a face in a cloud to someone and they just stared blankly at you like you'd suggested the cloud was doing taxes, you've experienced one of the more quietly interesting individual differences in human psychology. Because while everyone has face detection hardware, the sensitivity of that hardware varies enormously from person to person. Researchers have found that several psychological and neurological factors influence how intensely someone experiences pareidolia. And the results are, frankly, illuminating. People with higher levels of dopamine activity in their brains tend to see more patterns, faces included, in ambiguous stimuli. Dopamine is your brain's significant signaling chemical. It's involved in reward, motivation, and crucially, in telling you when something is meaningful. High dopamine doesn't just make you feel good. It makes you feel like things mean something, which is great for creativity and terrible for looking at a piece of toast without developing a whole narrative about the face on it. This is also why people with schizophrenia, whose dopamine systems are significantly dysregulated, often experience hyperactive pattern detection as part of their symptoms. The face in the carpet isn't just a quirky observation. It's a signal the brain is flagging as deeply significant. The same neural machinery that gives you a fun moment with a funny-looking cloud can, at higher intensity and without the anchor of reality checking, become something genuinely destabilizing. On the other end, people who are alexithymic, meaning they have difficulty identifying and processing emotions, tend to experience less pareidolia and show less FFA activation in response to face-like objects. Because the social-emotional package that bundles with face detection is quieter in their case, the whole system is somewhat less triggered. Anxiety levels matter too. Anxious brains are hypervigilant brains. They're running the predator detection software on maximum sensitivity, which means more false positives, which means more faces in the wallpaper, which means you're the person at the dinner party saying, "That ceiling stain looks genuinely furious," while everyone else is looking at their soup. The deeply ironic conclusion of all this research is that the people most likely to see faces everywhere are creative, dopamine-rich, pattern-hungry, slightly anxious, highly socially attuned humans. Which is basically just a clinical description of anyone who's ever been really good at art, comedy, or having too many thoughts at 3 a.m. Your face detection sensitivity is, in a way, a personality report, and yours is probably set to high. Otherwise, you wouldn't be watching this video. Number 2. Faces in the dark are a completely different horror story. Daytime pareidolia is fun. You see a grumpy cloud, you chuckle, you go about your business. But nighttime pareidolia is an entirely different psychological beast, and the reason for that difference tells you something genuinely important about how your brain calibrates fear. When ambient light drops, your visual system loses resolution. The sharp, high-contrast information your eyes normally feed your brain gets replaced with grainy, low-detail, high-ambiguity data. Your brain hates this. Ambiguity is the enemy. And when your visual input becomes less reliable, your brain doesn't respond by being more cautious about its conclusions. It responds by leaning harder on its pattern completion instincts to fill the gaps. In other words, the less clearly you can see, the more aggressively your brain auto-completes the picture. And what does it auto-complete with? The most evolutionarily significant pattern it knows. Faces. Specifically, faces in positions of threat, because the darkness equals danger association is ancient and deep and has been reinforced by approximately 10,000 generations of humans for whom things that moved in the dark at night were, statistically, bad news. This is why the shadowy corner of a dark room has a face in it. This is why the gap between your wardrobe and the wall looks like it's watching you. This is why a pile of clothes on a chair in the dark becomes, against your better judgment, a silhouette with a head. Your brain isn't malfunctioning. It is correctly running the protocol it was designed for. The protocol just hasn't been updated to account for the fact that the thing by your wardrobe is a cardigan. There's also a feedback loop at play. Once you think you see a face in the dark, mild anxiety kicks in. Anxiety sharpens hypervigilant processing. Sharper hypervigilant processing makes you even more likely to detect threatening patterns in ambiguous stimuli. The face seems to get clearer, more defined, more definitely there. Your brain has essentially frightened itself into a higher resolution version of the hallucination it started. This is not a character flaw. This is not irrationality. This is a precision-tuned survival system operating exactly as designed, just in a world where the wardrobe is not, in fact, a predator. Though to be fair, it does look pretty suspicious. Number 1. The face on Mars and what it tells us about the entire human species. In 1976, NASA's Viking 1 spacecraft took a photograph of the Cydonia region of Mars. In that photograph was a mesa, a flat-topped hill roughly 3 kilometers long. Due to the angle of sunlight and the low resolution of the image, it looked almost exactly like a human face staring up at the sky. Symmetrical. Eyes, a nose, a mouth, the whole setup. NASA noted it in their caption as a face-like landform, and moved on. The internet, or rather, the proto-internet communities of the late 70s and 80s did not move on. The face on Mars became one of the most enduring conspiracy theories of the 20th century. Books were written. Films were made. People dedicated years of their lives to the theory that an ancient civilization had constructed a monument so enormous it was visible from orbit. In 1998 and again in 2001, Mars Global Surveyor captured high-resolution images of the same formation. From any angle at any resolution, it was obviously a hill. A regular, geologically unremarkable hill that happened to have caught the light in a very specific way in a single photograph taken by a camera from the 1970s. The face was never there. But for 25 years, millions of people saw it, argued about it, felt certainty about it. And here's the thing, this isn't a story about stupidity or gullibility or people who should have known better. This is a story about what happens when you take the most powerful, most deeply wired pattern recognition system in the known universe and aim it at an ambiguous photograph. The conclusion was never really in question. The face detection hardware was always going to fire. The only variable was how long it took the rational mind to get the memo. Because that's the actual headline underneath all of this. Your face detection system is not a quirk. It is not a glitch. It is not even a flaw. It is the most fundamental and uncompromising feature of human social cognition, a system so important to your survival as a species that your brain built a dedicated brain region for it, wired it into your emotional architecture, activated it before you were 10 minutes old, and made it essentially impossible to override. You were never going to look at that mesa and see a hill. Not on the first try. Not with that brain. Not after 100,000 years of evolution pointing you directly at patterns in the dark and saying, pay attention. This matters. The faces in your toast, your power outlets, your bathroom tiles, your crumpled receipts, and the shadows on your bedroom wall at 2 a.m. are not your imagination running away from you. They are proof that you are a deeply, irreversibly, magnificently social animal, who also cannot make morning coffee without being judged by a latte. That's all for today. I'll be making similar videos in the future. Subscribe to see them.